Well, I'm going to say it one more time, and I'm sure for the ladies and mothers that are going to hear it again, but happy Mother's Day. I know for all of us, the experience is kind of a little different. For some people, this is a tough day. For some people, it's doesn't mean a whole lot. Maybe you didn't have that connection. For others, obviously, it's a time of reflection and celebration. And as I kind of always start off with, I realize in my life, in my journey with Christ, I'm always learning, I'm always trying to grow. I'm trying to figure out how to live like Jesus. And if you remember, we're going to jump into this real quick we kind of started this discussion, this idea called keys to the kingdom. And the verses I kind of pointed to, but Matthew chapter 16, I don't know if you could jump down to that, Patrick, back there. Matthew 16, verse, I want to say 20. Hopefully it shows up. Otherwise, I'll have to quickly look it up. It's coming. Oh, he got me. All right. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. We've started with the main idea that we have a responsibility to God's kingdom. Again, if you read the entirety of Matthew 16, and you see this encounter that Jesus had with his disciples, he tells Peter, I am giving you the keys of the kingdom. And if we kind of look at the bigger picture, Peter in a lot of ways kind of became the leader of the start of the local church. Last week, we looked at Moses. And I kind of spoke about one specific moment in Moses' life, but if you think about all the things that happened in his life, man, Moses was definitely a guy whose life was oversaw. God was watching over him from his birth to being put in a basket down the river, all the way through the end. And even ironically, as amazing as Moses was of a man, if you remember near the end, he kind of had this encounter with God where he doubted just a little bit. And God told him he wasn't going to make it into the paradise. Well, not eternal paradise, but the land flowing with milk and honey, as I describe it. If you don't know that part, there's a lot of good stuff about Moses. But what we focused on last week was his encounter with his father-in-law. I don't know if anyone's right now going, ooh, or mother-in-laws, right? Sometimes with Mother's Day, mother-in-laws, what do I get my mother-in-law? Luckily, I allow my wife to do that, but it's because it's her mom, right? I take care of my mom. Actually, she took care of my mom this year too, but she happened to be with her. But anyways, Moses has this experience with his father-in-law Jethro, and basically the concept I brought out of that was micromanaging, right? I don't know if I had you raise your hands last week, but again, how many of us struggle with that, micromanaging? That can be in your family, that can be at work. There's so many ways that works. And the advice that Jethro gave Moses, he basically said, well, don't do it. He said, you're going to wear yourself to death. It doesn't matter how strong you think you are, you're going to wear yourself to death. So he taught him to build up other leaders to help take some of that responsibility. And the questions we finished with were this: can we trust and can we be trusted? Can we trust other people when it comes down to it? And there's a lot of us, again, who've lived by that phrase, if you want something done right, do it yourself. But there's a flaw with that. In the end, you're gonna ruin yourself. And in the end, the reality of that phrase is this: every single one of us was created in God's image. Every single one of us was created by God. And if we live by that idea, in some ways, you could actually say that you're not trusting that God knows what he's doing. And believe me, all of us have been burned, right? How many of us, we've all been burned before? We've all trusted someone and said, oh, here you go. And then it didn't come back the way we expected. But even in those moments, how many of us can relate to the idea that we learned something from that, right? And then the other side of that question is, can we be trusted? And I kind of shared a little bit for myself. As I'm growing, I realize I need to be a husband, I need to be a father, I need to be an employee that can be trusted. That they say, Grayson, get this done, do this. Honey, can you please do the dishes? Right on it, yes, right away. Today, I want to take a look at someone else, and this is fitting for Mother's Day. I want us to look at Mary, Jesus' mother. obviously she played a pretty important role. If you think of this whole idea of the keys to the kingdom, you could make the argument that Mary had the most important role. God entrusted our salvation to this mother, to be mother, as she obviously was. And we're going to take in a moment, we're going to take a look at the book of Mark. And I want to look at just one specific instance. It's not going to, at first glance, you're going to kind of ask me, why is he pointing to this passage? It's not really about Mary. But there's some behind the scenes stuff I want to look at. So for Mother's Day, though, I still don't have a great joke compared to Carrie's. But I thought I would share 9 things moms would never say. Because I can see my mom, all the things that she was giving me instruction on. So I'm going to start with go ahead and go to number 9 here. And moms, you can relate to this. How on earth can you see the TV sitting so far back? Yeah? Because I sat like this. Go down to the next one. Yeah, I used to skip school too, a lot too. How many moms did you ever admit to that? Okay. Oh, a few honest ones. Actually, it could be different. Okay, let's go to 7. Number 7 is, just leave all the lights on. It makes the house look more cheery, right? Actually, I'm really that way too. I don't like a lot of lights on in my house. Go to the next one. Let me smell that shirt. Yeah, it's good for another week. Go ahead and go to number 5 here. Go ahead and keep that stray dog, honey. I'll be glad to feed and walk him every day. I don't know if you experienced that. I never had a dog, and that was part of my dad. But, well, if Timmy's mom says it's okay, then it's good enough for me. The curfew is just a general time to shoot for. It's not like I'm running a prison around here. Some of you may have that experience. I don't have tissue with me. Just use your sleeve. I know my mom never said that. And then the last one, which applies really well here to the Northwest, don't bother wearing a jacket. The wind chill is bound to improve. I like those because there's probably a million more we could all relate to. We've all heard or experienced. And it doesn't even have to necessarily be your mom. I'd probably say 2 of the most influential people in my life as close friends didn't have the same benefit as me of the mom that I had. One of them had an amazing grandma who helped raise him. The other one didn't have one so much. But what I would say is that for him, in some ways, I know my mom was a blessing to him. I know when people would come and share time with me in my house, whether they're hanging out for the night or just eating a meal together, I know that their life was affected by the way that my mom loved, meaning the way that she lived. Again, I know that we have different experiences, and that kind of shapes our perception at times. Some of you who know me well know that I'm probably not the most, I'm going to say, outwardly affectionate person at times. And that is something, unfortunately, my wife has to live with sometimes. I do like to hug and kiss her, but usually more private. But even when it comes to stuff like for Mother's Day or holidays, my mom, I know, loves cards. She loves just receiving a card. Not that she needs to have the card. She doesn't do this big old display of them. She usually just probably sticks them on the fridge. But I didn't give her a card this year. And actually, this morning, my dad had sent me a text message, I think, to all of us kids. And he says, "Where are the cards? Your mom hasn't gotten one yet." And I saw a response from my sister. I know that she had sent one, and she was like, "What? Mine hasn't got there yet?" And I responded to my dad, and I said, I haven't sent one this year. And I said, I got something else in mind. So I thought, in honor of Mother's Day, I wanted to just kind of lay it out there. So I shared this with my mom. I sent her an email. This is just something I wrote down. I'm not a poet. I'm not very literate either, so if I use words in the wrong way, I'm sorry. But I just kind of wrote something down about my mom. I'm just going to read it. Oftentimes, as young adults, we have delusions of grandeur when it comes to growing a family. Many young men and women have thought to themselves, "I want 5 children, or I'd like at least 3. That is until reality sets in after having their first. And in some extreme cases, they're second or third. My mother learned the lesson the hard way with her third child. Once, 31 years ago, her life was dramatically changed with a third child, and I was born. For those of you who have known me for any lengthy period of time, you may have heard that I wasn't the calmest in my family. I can't even begin to try and relate to the amount of stress and frustration I must have induced on my mom. From escaping a crib, going down a flight of stairs, opening a front door, and moseying down the street before I was 2 years old, to having Ninja Turtle fights, and let's just say potty wars in kindergarten. From laughing at her when she would spank me, to faking a stomach ache to stay home from school. From driving me to soccer practice to failing sophomore chemistry. I know that there were plenty of moments she probably found herself asking God, why me? Through all of it, my mom never gave up on me. No matter how many times I disappointed her, no matter how many times I disrespected her or unappreciated her, she always loved and always wanted what was best for me. Oftentimes in our journey of following Jesus, we paraphrase 1 Corinthians 10:13, believing that God will not give us more than we can bear. I know he thinks pretty highly of my mom to give her the responsibility of me. And I said, I love you, Mom. In a lot of ways, Mother's Day, as I've grown older and realized the function of family and realized of all the things that my mom has done, I kind of put it up there with Christmas and Easter. Now, maybe some of you are saying I'm pharisaical by saying that, but mothers are so valuable to life. And it's so easy sometimes to make silly jokes about driving or silly things like that. And without moms, we'd be in a world of hurt. Whenever you look at people who have made a major impact in this world, a lot of times, whether it's their wife or their mother, they say behind every great person is a great wife or a great mother. And that's the truth. And again, that doesn't have to be even biological. Other people, one of my aunts was adopted, and I know she was blessed by my grandmother. Some of you may have been adopted. Some of you may not have had your biological mother around. Let's take a look at Mary. And just exactly how, with this concept of giving the keys of the kingdom. I think when you look at Mary's life, especially for us living in America, we have to put perspective. We have to paint the picture correctly, because as women in American culture, things are extremely different than what they were. And Mary lived in a time and place that was male-dominated. Women didn't have a lot of value. I'm not saying that's what we think, but that's in the culture they lived in, they didn't. And even more than those particular cultures today. All around the world, things are different depending on where you live. But God chose Mary to change the world forever. Imagine for yourself, how many of you would imagine Mary has this angel Gabriel come to her and say, guess what? God's chosen you. You're going to have a baby, and you're going to name him Jesus. Now, maybe she didn't understand everything at that moment, but for us as individuals, how hard would that be to believe? Imagine that experience. She's probably like, what? It would have been difficult. It would have been difficult. Imagine telling her family. Imagine telling her friends. Imagine, again, not even just for her. If you think of what happened is Mary gets pregnant, and Joseph and her weren't even married yet. In that culture, that was punishable by death. So Joseph, not only Mary, but Joseph had to go around explaining this. Obviously, God didn't leave Mary hanging. Gabriel went and visited Joseph as well and said, hey, guess what? Don't leave your soon-to-be wife. Protect her, love her. This is my plan. And he kind of lays it out for him and says, she's going to give birth to my son. Again, this is you can call this GSV, Grace and Standard Version. I'm obviously paraphrasing here. But Mary was also confirmed in her experience by her cousin Elizabeth. If you remember the story, Elizabeth gave birth to John the Baptist. Other moments that confirmed her situation: when Jesus was born, shepherds, wise men visiting. And even another experience with it, I think it was Gabriel, I could be wrong. I think the Bible actually says an angel of the Lord. But right after Jesus was born, King Herod had kind of set forth a decree similar to the time of Moses, where he was hunting down young infant boys. And an angel of the Lord comes to Mary and says, guess what? You need to kind of move. You need to leave Egypt. Or you need to leave Jerusalem and you need to get to Egypt, basically is what happened. So God doesn't leave her hanging. God tells her what's going on. And this is where we're going to kind of pick up. We're going to leapfrog like 30 years. And we're going to look at a situation. Again, it's primarily about Jesus. But I think it talks a lot about the character of Mary. So Mark chapter 6, verse 1 through 6. I'm sorry if that's too little. I was trying to play with it. But Jesus left there and went to his hometown, accompanied by his disciples. When the Sabbath came, he began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were amazed. Where did this man get these things, they asked. What's this wisdom he has been given? What are these remarkable miracles he is performing? Isn't this the carpenter? Isn't this Mary's son and the brother of James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon? Aren't his sisters here with us? And they took offense at him. Jesus said to them, a prophet is not without honor except in his own town, among his relatives, and in his own home. He could not do any miracles there except lay his hands on a few sick people and heal them. He was amazed at their lack of faith. So again, you might be wondering, just mentions Mary briefly. And if you want to get a different picture, a kind of a other side of this, if you look at the Luke account, he describes it a little differently. But what sticks out to me is the reality for us is that the hardest people for us to reach and love most of the time are those closest to us. So it's just a brief experience. But Jesus is in Nazareth, where his family came back to after they had gone to Egypt, so he wasn't going to be killed as a kid. And his reputation had already grown. And the hardest people for him to even speak out to, the hardest people not believing it. And if you read later on in other books in the Bible, you actually kind of learn about his brothers. And James and I think Judas at different times kind of recognized, it wasn't until Jesus died and then rose that they even believed in him. So imagine, this is where it comes in from Mary. Imagine that pressure. She has the baby, confirmed with the wise men, confirmed with the angels. She's living in her hometown, and all those people still don't believe it. When I think about the situation, I'm like, man, that must have been tough. And then Jesus gets older, and his reputation has actually already started to establish itself. And they still don't believe. Imagine how Mary would have felt. The people, again, the culture of that time, when you describe an idea of maybe living in a city or a hometown, it's not like here in America where we all have our own houses. We can be pretty private if we want to. In their culture, everything was intertwined. Some towns were probably all related. I think Mary's kind of shared this in previous messages, where in their culture, when a man would grow up and have a wife, they would usually attach their house right onto his father's house. So you grow these almost communes, if you want to say, and then you develop these towns around. So everybody knew each other. Everyone was looking out for each other. And think about Mary. Mary had to deal with this because she knew who Jesus was. She believed in what he did. Yet all the people that they had grown up around, all the people closest to them, all their friends, all their family said, this is crazy. You can kind of flip it too and say, the hardest people for us to love and appreciate are those closest to us. I've struggled with this a lot in my life. Saying, I don't know about you, but I've gotten to the point where I'm comfortable saying I love you to like my brother and sister, but it's usually pretty quick. It's, oh, I love you. I don't know if any of you, or my parents, it's pretty easy, but we never, for whatever reason, it wasn't like we said it after everything growing up. But it can be tough. It's easy to kind of go through the motions of everyday life and not show our appreciation for the people closest to us, right? Even for the little things. And what I should say, not even, I should say especially for the little things. The things we can take for granted every day. Kind of in regards to Mother's Day, I looked up another man who, I've said this last week, and I feel that there's always people who've said it better than me. And there's a guy you may have heard of, his name Washington Irving. And he said this about mothers. A mother is the truest friend we have. When trials heavy and sudden fall upon us, when adversity takes the place of prosperity, when friends who rejoice with us in our sunshine desert us, when trouble thickens around us, still will she cling to us and endeavor by her kind precepts and counsels to dissipate the clouds of darkness and cause peace to return to our hearts. If you read further in Jesus' life, all the way to the very end, Mary stuck with him. Carrie, I think mentioned a while back that you don't even hear a lot about Joseph, and I don't think that's a knock on him. Can't explain all the reasons why that is, but it seems like Mary never leaves his side. Always there to support him. And if you've seen maybe the movie The Passion of the Christ, you can picture that scene maybe in your mind when Jesus is being hung on the cross. And for any parent, you can imagine how big of a struggle that would be. Especially if there were times or moments where Jesus could have denied his will, God's will, his purpose, and he could have saved his life. I'm sure his mom was like, just don't say anything and they won't do this to you. When I think of Mary, a perfect word that describes her is faithful. In the book of Hebrews, we get the perfect definition of the word. Now, faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. When it comes to our responsibility to God's kingdom, I think we can learn, obviously, a very, very important idea from Mary, and that's faithfulness. It's not going to be easy. Actually, in a lot of ways, we talk about this here at Fellowship a lot. Following Christ, in some ways, will make your life harder because you're trying to do the right thing. You're trying to live like Jesus did. Jesus said, you've heard it said, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, but I tell you, love your enemies. How hard is that? It's tough. Who wants to love people that don't like them? A lot of times we just want to be like, forget you. I would say when you look at the big picture, again, going back to Mary, I don't think she knew exactly how everything was going to play out. But she knew God, and she trusted. She knew that God had trusted her with his son. And she remained faithful. So here's this question we'll finish with. If we recognize God has given us the keys to the kingdom, will we remain faithful like Mary? Again, I think for myself, I've been blessed, and I know that I could not tell my mother I love her enough. So much of, and some of you may snicker, but so much of the things that I have become, the character that I embrace, has come from my mom. Again, it's not saying anything about my dad. My dad has shaped me a lot too. And I know my mom, through everything, has remained faithful. And that's what I want to do in my journey with Christ. Is I want to remain faithful through thick and thin, no matter what happens. Even when the world is crowded up around us, Even as some of the ladies shared, being a mother is probably the hardest thing to do. Not only the start, but letting go as your kid gets older, watching them grow up and go to school for the first time, watching them graduate high school, even though at the time as the child you're cheering, for a parent. I haven't been there yet, so I can't necessarily say I relate, but I don't even want to get to that point yet. Watching them maybe get married, have their kids. So, will we remain faithful? God, I just thank you for this morning.